Hello students, this is lesson 2 for the chapter Morphology of Flowering Plants. Students, in this video, we will discuss about the following points. And these points are the modification of the different types of roots and the functions that the root performs. But before discussing about our main topics today, let's have a quick revision of what we have studied in the last class. In the last class, the characteristics of the roots were discussed. The characteristics, it means the general characters or the features that the root possesses, such as the roots, they are non-green in color and so they cannot manufacture their own food. The roots, they are basically found in the downward portion of the plant body. Then the roots, they do not have the nodes and the internodes. Then we went on to study the types of roots. The types of roots that includes the taproot, fibrous roots and the adventitious root. So after going through such kind of features of the root system, in today's class we are going to discuss about the different modifications that some plants or the roots of some plants they possesses. But before that, let's try to understand what is the term modification mean. Modification, in very simple word, are the slight changes that a particular body possesses. In case of the root system, also there are slight changes, and these slight changes are only called as the modification of roots. And in that there are several types of modifications, as for example the modification of taproot. The modification of taproot, that is also divided into some categories based on their function and based on their shape and size. So similarly, the modifications of adventitious or fibrous roots can also be seen. So in today's class, we are going to study in details about the different modifications of this type of roots. So let's begin the class today. At first, we are going to discuss about the modification of taproot. Before going into the modifications again, at first we have to know what are the taproots. In the diagram, I think you can now remember which were called as the taproots. Taproots were those which are born from the radicle of the embryo and they grows as the primary root and which continues to grow towards the whole lifetime of a particular plant body. It have a primary root, and this primary root, it gets supported by the secondary root and the tertiary roots. Now these taproots, they undergoes modification from the slender structure and they changes their shape accordingly. Now what are the reasons of such type of modifications? The modification of taproot have certain purposes. Now let's see what are those purposes are. The purpose of modification of the taproots can be for the storage of food. Some plants, they stores their food in the root system, and because of the storage of food, they become swollen in size and they bears different kind of shapes and sizes. Otherwise, modification of taproot also takes place for some physiological reasons. As for example, there are some plants where they uses their roots for the purpose of respiration. As we perform respiration through our nostrils, similarly the plant body also have stomata for the purpose of respiration, that is the exchange of gases. But in case of some plants, the roots too have to take part in such type of respiratory exchanges. So in that, such kind of plants, they undergo those modifications, or it can be for some other physiological functions, so that we are going to discuss one by one. At first, let's come to the first purpose of the modifications of taproot. The modifications of taproot undergoes because of storage of food, and in that there are 4 types of modifications, and these 4 types of modifications are fusiform roots, conical roots, napiform roots, and tuberous roots. These are the names of the modifications of tap root depending upon their type of growth or the shapes and the size that they attains. Now let's take the example and try to understand what type of modifications they are or why they are called as such. The first type, that is the fusiform roots or fusiform modification of tap roots. Here, before describing about this part, let's take the example first. The fusiform roots are the radish. All of you are familiar with the picture of radish. Radish, that is a root, and this radish, it undergoes modification for the storage of food, and that is why the radish or the primary taproot that gets swollen and becomes a structure which is called as the fusiform root. In case of the radish, as you can see in the picture, that the middle portion, that is generally broader than that of the base and the tip or towards the apical portion of the root. So in case of the fusiform root, the base and the apex, that is slightly narrower, though it is fleshy, but it is narrower than that of the middle region, which is broader or it is thicker with the tissue mass. So this we can resemble with that of a spindle shape. So it is also called as the spindle shaped root. Here, in case of the radish, mainly half or less than half of the part towards the apex, that is the part of the hypocotyl from the embryo of an dicotyledonous angiospermic plant body. As we know that the radish, they belongs to the dicotyledonous angiosperms. So this lower part of the radish, that is towards the tip, or which we also call it as the apical portion, that is towards the tip, that is the part of the hypocotyl region from the embryo. So mainly because of the shape, that is the spindle shape, it is called as fusiform root. So the first part or the first modification that we have studied now is about the fusiform root, in which the radish belongs. Now let's come to the next part of the modification of taproot, which also serves the same function, that is the storage of food, and it is called as conical taproot or conical modification of taproot. Here again, it is also same as that of the radish, that is mainly it will be fleshy in its structure, but there is a slight change with that of a radish. In case of the conical taproot, here the shape of the root or the swollen root, it will be like a cone, and as it resembles the shape of a cone, that is why it is called as conical taproot. So can you guess that what type of root do we have that resembles like that of a cone. And the example of such type of modification is carrot. So basically in this part we are going to discuss about all the vegetables that we eat. So as the carrot, we see that it grows below the soil. So this is totally the tap root part of the plant body. Now here what happens, that why it is called as the conical taproot, because it attains the shape of a cone. That means towards the base of the root or towards the upper side, so it is mainly broader, and as it comes towards the lower side of the taproot, it becomes narrower. Means very gradually it becomes narrower in shape and it resembles like that of a cone, and hence the name it is given as conical taproot. Now in case of both this type of roots, that is the fusiform root and the conical root, here we find secondary roots also, and these secondary roots, if you have seen, then we find some hair-like structures towards the tip of the root or towards the lower portion of the root, and these are the secondary roots which are very much reduced in size, but they are present. So that also gives us a clue that these are the tap roots, and these tap roots, they have undergone modification, that is it has become fleshy because of the storage of food, and that we take it as our food or vegetables. Now let's come to the third type of modification. This is also a vegetable, and this third type of modification, this is called as the napiform root or napiform modifications of the taproot. Now in case of the napiform modifications of the taproot, here the structure, it becomes a globular one. That means it is spherical in structure, and towards the tip it becomes narrower in a very abrupt way. Suddenly it becomes narrower. That means towards the base of the root it is a globular structure, and towards the middle portion, that globular structure it continues, but towards the tip of the root, that means towards the lower side of the root, it becomes narrow, and very narrow, very abruptly, very suddenly. Same again, can you guess which is the vegetable that we eat, which is a root and where we have a spherical structure? The example for the napiform roots are the beetroots and the turnip. These two are called as the napiform root. So it is very simple to understand this type of modifications, as these are the vegetables that we use in our day-to-day life, or we consume it in a daily life. We consume it in our daily life. In this way, let's come to the fourth modification, which is for the storage of food, and this is called as the tuberous root. Now in case of a tuberous root, which is very much easier, that all the other three, they have a particular shape and they have a particular size, a shape and a size that was already there, and on the basis of that they were named in a different way, such as fusiform root, middle portion that is fleshier, more fleshier or broader than that of the base and the tip, conical, that is towards the, from the base it becomes broader, and towards the tip it becomes narrower very gradually. Then in case of a napiform root, there we have found that it is generally globular right from the base towards the middle, and towards the tip it becomes abruptly very narrow. Now in case of tuberous root, what happens, that they do not have a definite shape, and because they do not have a definite shape, therefore they are regarded as a simple tuberous tap root or tuberous modifications of taproot. And the example of such type of roots can be seen in a flowering plant which is called as Mirabilis jalapa, which in our common language that is also called as a 4 o'clock plant. And a very good example of another vegetable that we eat, that is the vegetable, but the root system, it is like that of a tuberous root, that is of the pointed gourd. In Assamese we call it as potol, and its scientific name is Trichosanthus. In English it is called as the pointed gourd, and in Assamese it is called as potol. So there, in that particular plant, the roots, they are tuberous in nature. That means they are fleshy, no doubt in that, but they do not, the roots, they do not have a definite shape. So these are the 4 types of modifications of the taproot whose purpose was for the storage of food. Now let's come to the other 2 modifications. A very important one, that is called as pneumatophores. As I have said, that some plants, they require their root system to take part in the process of exchange of gases, and such a type of root system, that is called as pneumatophores. And these pneumatophores, they are found in the region of mangrove forest. Now what it is mangrove forest? Mangrove forests are those forests which are near the seas or oceans. Now what happened? These are the forests which are very likely to come in contact with the saline water from the seas and the ocean. But our angiospermic plants, they are not such, very much compatible with such type of environmental conditions. So generally such type of conditions, they are adverse for them. But in case of such type of plants which are called as the mangrove plant, such as Rhizophora, Hericiera, so these plants, they undergo modification because they can compensate their processes by just increasing their respiratory function. And in that, what they do, that they points out their root tips out of the water level. So in the diagram, as you can see, that they have made their roots come out of the water. That means it is the root tip that comes out of the water level, and the root tips, they help in the process of respiration, that is for the exchange of gases. And as they increase their respiratory functions, in that they can survive during those days or during those months in which they come in contact with the saline water. In that way, such plants, they can survive in their adverse condition also. So in India, I think you have heard about the forest which is called as Sundarban, which is generally located in the coastline area of West Bengal and Orissa. So there we find such type of pneumatophores in such kind of mangrove forest, or they are also called as mangrove plant. And such type of mangrove plants are the Rhizophora and the Hericiera. And now let's come to the last one, which is the nodulated roots. Nodulated roots, as we know, that some leguminous plants. I hope you have understood what does the word legume mean. Legume, that means these are the plants from which we get our pulses, such as dal, beans, etc. Or the one such as Mimosa pudica, that is touch me not plant. So all this, they belongs to the leguminous plant category. These leguminous plants, they are very much helpful for the fixation of nitrogen. And these plants, they can fix nitrogen in huge amount because of an interaction. And this interaction, it takes place in between a bacteria and the roots of this leguminous plant. The bacteria, they do some infections within the root system or within the taproot system of such kind of plants, that is the leguminous plant, and the root system, it becomes swollen at the tips. And these swollen tips, where the bacteria is also present, this is called as the nodulated roots. So these nodulated roots, they are very much common along with the plants of the Leguminaceae family. This is a family in which all our pulses that we eat, that belongs to. So these are the 6 types of the modifications of taproot that we have studied now. 4 were for the storage of food, and the other 2, that is the pneumatophores and the nodulated root, that is for the purpose of physiological function. Next, we are going to discuss about the modifications of fibrous root and the adventitious roots.